Hey guys, and welcome to today's video. So today I'm going to be doing my next Best in Beauty of 2021. If you missed my very first video of this series, then I will link it down below in the description box. It is my face products. It's just the best products that you possibly could have found from the year. So you really are getting the best of the best in these videos. I definitely encourage you guys to hit the subscribe button down below so you don't miss my future Best in Beauty and other videos to come, and let's get started. As I forgot to mention, this is going to be the cheek category. Some people include cheeks in face, but I think that there's so many incredible products in this category alone. I was like, it's gonna have its own. And let's start with cream contour. I tried to do an even amount of high-end and drugstore, but only if they're like deserving of being in this video. I'm not gonna like mention drugstore products that are all right just to have them in this video. So this specific category, the cheek category, has less drugstore, unfortunately. But these videos also help me realize what areas I need to test more from the drugstore, and I absolutely will do so this year. But there's definitely some very affordable options in here. So my absolute favorite cream contour of all time is the one I'm wearing today, and that is the Makeup by Mario Soft Sculpt Shaping Stick, the contour stick. I have it in the shade Light. So this is the actual stick here, twist up and down. This is the shade Light. So as you can see, it's a pretty neutral shade. Once you blend it in, it has a little bit more warmth than it looks there, but it's not too warm. I am really fair, so typically contour and bronzers, I do not like really orangey products, but I am neutral, so I can pull off some more warmth. And it is a really beautiful shade for contour, especially if you don't want it to be ashy, like you still want a little bit of warmth to your contour. Kind of the perfect shade for that. These are actually very, very pigmented, so it's very intimidating. Like I remember when I reviewed it, I was like, whoa, this is gonna be all over my face. This was a horrible mistake. But not only is the formula incredibly blendable, it's like almost foolproof, but also the brush that they give you is to die for. I honestly have gone in with this brush with other cream contours. I love it that much. So it's very interesting looking. It's kind of an angled, dense buffing brush, and it has these little like dots along. The product, the formula is to die for. It's long wearing. It's not patchy. It's not dry, but it's not too creamy where it's oily. It's the perfect consistency where it's really creamy and blendable, but it's also going to stay there all day, not slip and slide and break down your makeup. Absolutely incredible. Now, another product that I absolutely fallen in love with is the Patrick Ta For Face Cream Contour and Powder Bronzer Duo. So this isn't just cream contour, but specifically the cream contour in this one is what I love the most about it. So this is in the shade She's Statuesque. So this is the actual cream contour. It comes with a little plastic covering so you don't get any of the powder inside, which is great. And it is really, really nice. As you can see, I've used quite a bit of it. I really enjoy this shade. This is probably one of the most flattering shades for my skin tone. As much as I love this one so much, it has a little bit more warmth. Contouring is actually supposed to be like shading. Now, when you go in with bronzer, it's typically more to add warmth and color. Now you can use some bronzers, like I'm not saying you can't use warmth, you can use whatever you want, but when you're going down to the science of it, that's technically what it's for. And so for contour, you typically want a little bit of a cooler toned shade to kind of have that shaded effect. And this shade has a little bit more of a cooler tone, not ashy at all. It's hard to find cool tone contours that aren't ashy. So when you see them next to each other, you can see a lot less orange in this one, it is a much more flattering shade for my skin tone. As much as I love the Makeup by Mario, this one is probably the best shade for my skin tone. It is not super, super pigmented, but it is buildable. But it is such an incredible formula. It melts into the makeup as well as just the same things I loved about this. It has that creaminess to it without being too creamy. It's not dry by any means, and it melts into the makeup. And then also, obviously, you get the bronzer as well, which is incredible. And this bronzer is really beautiful too. It's maybe not my favorite bronzer because it is not the darkest. Like It could be maybe a little bit more pigmented, and you'll see what I mean. But at the same time, you don't always need something that's going to add a lot of color. I just personally like the Duo by Patrick Ta. The formulas are incredible, and paired with the brush that you can also purchase separately, A+. So my drugstore favorite of cream contour. Now this is technically a cream bronzer, but I use it for contouring, and it is the Soul Body, which is by ColourPop, the Face and Body Bronzing Balm. So you can also use this to bronze up the body. I personally like to use it to add color to the face and even to contour. Now it is a little bit warm for contouring, I will admit. It has even more kind of warmth to it, but it still works, especially in those summer months. It's very pigmented. It is very creamy, blendable, and buildable and easy to work with, and it has like a nice scent to it. Now if you're against fragrance, you might not love that, but it's kind of tropical, like summery, and it's very light though. It's not super intense. I like the large pan. It's easy to get a brush in there. I definitely recommend. Pretty much all three have similar qualities. So moving on, we have the cream blush category. This was very difficult for me, very difficult, because I love cream blush. Now I test a lot of cream blush. It's something I'm attracted to when I'm looking online and purchasing. So it was definitely hard for me to narrow it down even to these, but these are definitely like my top favorites that I grab all the time. I can't rave about these enough. So my absolute favorite cream blush, not only for formula, but also for the shade. The shade is definitely also another reason why I'm obsessed with this, is the Hourglass Vanish Blush Stick. This is to die for. And I actually did not expect to like this nearly as much as I did. It looked a little bit harder. It looked a little bit less creamy. Like when I swatched it, didn't look like it was gonna blend out seamlessly, and I'm like, I don't know. Plus it's expensive, it's very expensive, but let me tell you, it's worth every penny. Long story short, because I could rave about these forever, so I'm gonna try my best to be very like precise to the point. Look at how intensely pigmented that is. Now, believe it or not, it is not nearly as intimidating as this looks. So it's a little bit more difficult to show in a swatch when I'm using my finger to blend out, but when you use a sponge, I like to use my dampened beauty blender. Like even there you can see how much it blended out. There's no streaks, there's no like marks. It blends out like a dream. And with a sponge, like I won't go that heavy with it. Like it is very pigmented, but it's also much more blendable and creamy than you would expect. I usually will just do a little line here and go in with my sponge, and then I'll typically apply a little bit extra to my sponge to just add a little bit where I need to add it. It is a nice like natural matte finish. So it's not super matte and looks kind of dry and like doesn't emphasize texture, but it's also not like dewy. And me being oily combo skin type, I don't love a lot of products that are super, super dewy. I like some products, like there's a couple in here that have a little bit more of like a satin dewier finish. This is one that I find, like I like to pack on the powder, and even when I do, it's still poking through really, really well. You can use this over top of powder. Obviously be more careful, because any type of cream or liquid product over top of powder, whether it's an incredible formula or not, you can eventually disturb your makeup underneath if you're not doing it properly. So typically what I tend to recommend is if you're doing powder and then your cream blush, make sure you're applying your cream blush to the sponge, not to your face, because it'll be a lot harder to blend out when you've applied it to the powder. It'll stick a lot more. But when you have it on your sponge and you're just dabbing it a little bit more precisely than you would if you were putting it just off on fresh foundation, just a little bit more precisely, you know, don't go everywhere because it's harder to blend it out when you have powder. But this is one that doesn't break down the foundation if you do it correctly, which I find very convenient. You know, if you maybe didn't put enough on and then you want to add a little bit on top, it's nice to have that option, and this is one of those. So I really, really love this. Now, the other one that I absolutely have fallen in love with and I'm wearing today is the Makeup by Mario Soft Pop Blush Stick. This is in the shade Pale Petal. Kind of similar, but it has a little bit more of a pinky undertone than the reddish orangey undertone that the Hourglass has. So as you can see, pretty similar, but you can definitely tell the difference when you put them next to each other. And then the biggest difference is that this one has a much dewier finish to it. Now, I know I said I loved the natural matte, but the reason I love this is it has a nice dewy finish, but it doesn't make you feel oily, greasy. It doesn't feel heavy. It isn't overly dewy where you look like you're like greasy on your cheeks. It is really, really nice. It sets down nicely, just like the Hourglass one. You can apply it over top of powder, just as I explained with the Hourglass, again, being careful. But it is very versatile, user-friendly, easy to work with. The shade is stunning. It blends out like a dream. It's pigmented, blendable, buildable, like all the things I've mentioned about the Hourglass, but just a bit of a dewier finish. And again, it comes with the brush. So definitely recommend this one. And this one is actually much more affordable. So if you don't want to invest in something like this, which I do recommend, but this one is just as good. And it is a little bit cheaper. Now, I told myself I was gonna narrow it down to 2 cheek cream blushes for the high end, but I couldn't. It is the Tarte Breezy Cream Blush. The reason that I chose this one is because I felt it was a little bit different. And there's something about this one, it is a little bit more natural. Now, not that these ones can't look just as natural, but this one, there's just something about this one that just, I want to grab it on those days where I just want to look so naturally beautiful. Like, I don't want to look super glam. It's maybe not the most pigmented cream blush. It is very buildable, but it's just so natural. It just looks like you have naturally flushed cheeks. It has a natural kind of like satin finish. Like, it's not matte, but it's not dewy. Kind of fits in the middle. It is hydrating to the skin without feeling greasy. And it's super, 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 super easy to work with. Probably the easiest to work with out of all 3 that I've mentioned, because it is maybe a little bit less pigmented. You might have to build it a little bit more, but for those of you that maybe want a little bit more natural, it's maybe you're more of a beginner, this would maybe be the one I would recommend because it's just so stinking pretty and easy to work with. It is very pigmented, like when you, like I swirled my finger in it. So this is the shade here. I just really like the shade. It's much different. It has a more of a mauvey kind of cooler toned to it. So for those of you that like a more cool toned, I love that one. As you can see, it just kind of softened really easily and blended out, especially when you use a sponge. Now, my drugstore favorite is my e.l.f. Putty Blush. Very pigmented, very long wearing. It's creamy, it's blendable, and it is easy to work with. And I really, really enjoy that it is super affordable, and it is very comparable to the last 3 that I mentioned. It's maybe not quite as perfect as those 3, but it is pretty darn close and about a fraction of the price. So I definitely recommend it, and I really do enjoy it. Look at how beautiful, like naturally flushed. Now, I thought I would also include a liquid blush. It is different. If you look for more liquid formulas, then this is the one to go with, and that is the NATASHA DENONA Puff Paint. It is a serum blush, so it's very hydrating, it's very natural, and it's just very good for your skin, yet beautiful on the skin. This one is in the shade Daria. This is the formula. So it's liquid, but it is probably actually one of the easiest formulas I'm mentioning. Look at how easily that blended out. Like, do you see this? Like, it blended out like an absolute dream. A little bit more of a natural cream blush. It's almost more of like a cheek stain in a sense. It's like a blush serum, but the best thing about this one is that it lasts so long. Never goes anywhere. It never fades. It is so beautiful. Now we're done with creams. We finally finished creams. Now let's move on to powders. So the first one is bronzer. And this is actually a rediscovery for me. When I was thinking about this video, I was thinking about like, what bronzers have I really been loving lately? What bronzers do I gravitate to? What bronzers do I love? And this is one that I automatically thought of. And it is the NARS bronzer in Laguna. I know this is like, come on, Caitlin, we all know it's great. Like, I've rediscovered it as my favorite, and it is one that I want to kind of bring back to the front of my drawer because I love it that much. I actually got this as a sample. Was it a sample in Sephora? And that's how I rediscovered it. Now I have it in a larger pan, but I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't used this in a while. I'll just test this little guy. And I'm like, oh, I forgot how pigmented it is, but blendable. And it just like gives you the most perfect bronzy color. I'll show you. I think I like it because it's not super, super warm toned. And a lot of bronzers tend to be. So this one is a nice kind of neutral bronzer that I think suits everybody. It has like the tiniest bit of a sheen to it. So it gives you like that healthy, it doesn't look dry. It almost gives you like a healthy glow without looking glowy at all. Like it comes across more matte, but when you look really up close, it kind of just in the light, it just makes you look super healthy and gives you that sheen. So I really like it. It's super blendable as well. Drugstore favorite, couldn't be beat this year. This year I still have been loving my butter bronzer. This is the best bronzer I think I've ever discovered, and I have yet to find one that will beat it. It's number one, super affordable and compared to the high-end ones. And it's just so incredibly smooth, creamy, blendable, foolproof, easy to use, gives you so much beautiful color. This one is in the light bronzer, which I do find maybe a tiny bit light for me, but at the same time, I think I like it so much because it's light, so that if I just want a little bit of color, like just a little bit, it's what I used, actually no, I used a different shade. I used the shade just the regular bronzer, so it's a little bit darker today to add a little bit of color. So this one's even lighter. It's completely matte. You don't see any glitter, any shimmer, any sheen to it, but it's just such a creamy, creamy formula that it almost looks like it's gives a nice kind of healthy sheen. It's smoothing to the skin, and that's what I love about it. Sometimes bronzers can look a little patchy, emphasize, like powders can emphasize texture. This is the total opposite of that. It's so smooth, silky, blendable, and foolproof. Love it. Now, next we have powder blushes. So my favorite high end is actually from Pat McGrath. So this year they came out with blush finally. I am in love. So this is actually very, very similar to my last year's favorite, which is the Clinique Cheek Pop blushes. The reason I loved those, and also the reason I love these, is they're pigmented, but they almost are like virtually powderless. Like they almost, you apply it and you're like, did I just use cream blush? Sometimes powder blushes can look a little drying to the skin, emphasize texture, maybe look a tiny bit powdery, like you kind of want to go over with setting spray to melt it into the makeup. But these just like soak into the makeup and look almost like cream, but they're powder. So I really, really like this. This shade is to die for too. It's the Divine Rose, which is a nice like cool toned like rosy tone. Like, don't you see how it doesn't even look like powder? And it almost has a bit of that healthy sheen. So when I say healthy sheen, I don't mean any glitter. I don't mean any shimmer. It doesn't have any pearl finish to it. It's just like that, like creamy, and smoothing, that it looks almost like it's added like a healthy smoothing effect. My favorite drugstore, which this isn't, I mean, I guess technically drugstore, but my favorite blush in the more affordable category is from ColourPop, and it is number one. I love ColourPop's blush. I always have, I always will. Their formulas are so great. They're super comparable to high-end blushes, yet at a fraction of the price, but this one specifically I fell in love with because of the color. So this is the shade Fashion District from the Melrose collection. It's a warmer toned, kind of peachier blush, but it almost has a bit of like a bronziness to it. So I really, really liked this one in the summer. I still use it though. If you're going for more of that like bronzed, contoured look, so it adds color, but it doesn't like take away from the contour. It almost adds to the contour and just adds a little bit of like a peachiness to it. It makes you look even more like a bronzed goddess. So we have next the highlight category, and actually Pat McGrath, you came through and you made it in 2 categories in a row, Pat. Come on. I mean, these products are so expensive. Like the blush is ridiculous. This highlight is ridiculous, but they're worth it. So if you have, you know, Christmas money or birthday money, or you kind of like to like save money and put it aside for you to maybe buy things for yourself, if you are interested in one of these products that you want to invest in, I recommend it for sure. Do you need to spend this money to get a good product? Absolutely not, but it's worth it. So this is the Pat McGrath Skin Fetish Sublime Skin Highlighter. This is their newest one in the shade Lunar Nude, and it is one of the first highlights I've ever tried from Pat McGrath. It is so ridiculously stunning. I never really understood why people would spend that much on a highlight, and then I got it. So as you can see, it's number one, a beautiful, beautiful shade. Like it's almost like a rose gold, but it's not too dark. I find a lot of rose golds are really dark for fair skin, but it's also not too light. So it's like a very universal shade that I think would flatter a lot of people. And it's not like overbearingly bright, especially if you're looking for like, you don't want to be like intensely glam, but you want to like have a really bam highlight. This is like the perfect one because like from a distance, it doesn't look like you have an like disco ball on your face. But when you get up to the light, see that? Like how it just gives that beautiful like bam sheen, you know? Should we apply some? So I'm gonna put this on one side and then I'll put the drugstore on the other side. Don't you just see how like it's subtle, but it's in the light, it's like bam. Just like the most finely milled and the most like flattering highlight ever. It's super like smoothing, it doesn't accentuate texture. Now, another highlight that I really love that is like a lot cheaper. Fractions, guys, fractions of the price. And that is the Wet n Wild Mega Glow Highlighting Powder. This one I've used like off and on for a while, but I've really grown to love this year. And like definitely the best highlighter I've ever tested specifically from the drugstore. It's one of my absolute favorite highlighters. I think I love it, man, I don't know, maybe even more than the Pat McGrath. That is how much I love this highlight. This is the shade Precious Petals. It has a little bit more gold to it, a little bit less of that rosiness, but it's pretty similar. It is a little bit brighter, but it is still so finely milled. It is so smooth, doesn't emphasize texture. It is one of the most beautiful highlights I've ever worked with, and it is from Walmart. So this one you will see is maybe a little bit brighter, and it doesn't look like glittery. It's so finely milled. All the products I'm mentioning wear all day. They don't fade or disappear on you. So like bam, bam. Don't you see they're so similar? Now we have one more category, and that is face palette. Actually, the dominating area in this category was drugstore. I mean, I guess it's not technically a palette, but I included in the palette because it offers a bronzer, a highlight, and a blush. So even though it's more compact, it's still in some ways a palette. That is the KAJA Play Bento Trio. This is in the shade Butter Up. It's the lightest like trio. So it comes with a powder blush, which has, at least this one has a bit of like a, like looks like it has a bit of a shimmer to it, but it is pretty matte. Highlight is powder as well, and it's nice and very travel friendly. And then the cream bronzer, and I use this for contour all the time. So let's show you the shades. Number one, whoa, cool, dug my nail into it. We're having a great time over here, guys. So the cream bronzer is more neutral. It is a really good one to go in with contour. It's extremely pigmented. It blends out like a dream, melts into the makeup. One of my favorite cream contours as well. So love the cream contour. The blush is really beautiful. It is a powder blush, as I said. It has a nice kind of peachy pink shade to it. It's like a good blush. It has pigmentation to it. It blends out. It's easy to use. And it has a nice kind of matte finish to it without looking like dry and powdery. And the highlight is really stunning as well. It's like a nice champagne. It is a little bit softer maybe. But do you see how it almost looks like kind of dewy? Like it has a nice soft and subtle effect, but it's so finely milled, like has a nice sheen to it that it gives you like that kind of lit from within, like beautiful, soft glow, and I really, really like that. Now we're getting into like real palettes. My favorite from the drugstore is the Physicians Formula All-Star Face Palette. This has been a home run in my opinion. So you get a lot of product in here. It's about $25 Canadian, and a full-size bronzer is about $20 or $25 Canadian. So you get a smaller amounts, but a very good amount of product for a pretty reasonable price. So number one, you get a butter bronzer, which I've already mentioned as my favorite. It is in the shade bronzer. So if you're dark skin tone, it's not going to be dark enough for you, unfortunately. So that would be the negative on this palette. Like if they could come out with maybe a couple different color, even just one more that has a darker bronzer, that would obviously be good. It also comes with the Matte Monnois butter bronzer. I don't love it as much. It's not quite as silky smooth, but it is really nice. It has also a little bit more of a warmer tone to it. So if you like a lot of warmth and you like a nice matte finish, you will really like this one. It is still really good, blends out really well. It's very pigmented. It comes with two highlights. So this one is the Powder Palette Mineral Glow Pearls. A little bit of a softer highlight, I will be honest, but they're good. It comes with a finishing powder as well. So you can use that to set the face. I don't use it too much. Like I would use it more to kind of finish and blend out things. You can use it like under the eye. It has a pretty, like it's kind of brightening. So I think a lot of people use it under the eye to kind of set and brighten. I forgot to swatch the other highlight, which is a little bit more gold and a little bit more like BAM. So I prefer this highlight. I actually really, really love this highlight specifically. It is the Rose All Day Petal Glow. It has a nice like gold finish to it. It's super finely milled and not powdery at all, not sparkly, chunky, any of that. And then I absolutely love this one as well, which actually I will say I do recommend this as well as a powder blush because you can purchase them individually. This is definitely probably the best powder blush I've ever tested from the drugstore, like the actual drugstore, like go into Walmart, go into Target and you can buy it. This is the best, and it is the Mood Boosting Blush by Physicians Formula. It has a bit of a sheen to it, so incredibly flattering. It adds like a healthy glow without making you look super highlighty. Like I don't love glowy blushes, but this is just beautiful. And as you can see, like it almost has that like kind of sheen to it. It's not overly pigmented, but it is very buildable. It is one of the most flattering blushes, and it is from the drugstore. So not only do I really recommend that individual blush, but I also recommend this palette. This is one that I hope they keep around permanently. And then the last two are from Morphe. Not necessarily drugstore, but they're really, really affordable. So the first one is just a blush palette, and it is the 8C. They also have other color options. So if you don't like the more cool tones, which this is the Cool Pro palette, then you could go for the more warmer tones. I love this because it comes with a beautiful array of blushes. You know, you get your dark kind of wintry shades, I call them. Like I like to go for these ones in the winter. It gives you that kind of like really rich rosy cheek. And then I like these two. They're more like warmer, on the warmer neutral side. And then they have just a really beautiful variety of color. They have a couple matte options, and then they have some more with like sheens to them. The best blush palette of the year, hands down, and it's so affordable. And then the last product of this video is the 8F. So this palette is more of a face palette, and I really, really like this one specifically because it kind of comes with everything you need. So it comes with a brightener, which I honestly don't use very often because I just find it a little bit maybe too dark for my skin tone. The rest of them I love. It comes with 3 bronzers, so light, medium, and dark. The darker one is called a contour. They all have a pretty warm undertone, but they are really, really beautiful, pigmented, matte finish, blendable, really work well and comparable to the powder bronzers I already mentioned. Then it comes with 2 blushes. One is matte, one has a sheen to it. The matte one looks like a light bronzer as well, but it actually, when you swatch it, has a much more kind of pink tone to it. So it's kind of like you put it next to the palette. This actually has a lot more like peachy pink to it. The next one is a little bit more pink, the one with a bit of a sheen, but nothing too insane. Like it is just a different finish, that more like satin finish. Really beautiful color as well. And then it comes with a more kind of cream to powder highlight and then a powder highlight. So you're getting so much variety. I love the colors in this. So yeah, that is the end of today's video. I am really excited to be sharing these with you as I have fallen in love with all of them and I highly recommend each and every one to you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Give me a thumbs up down below and I will see you guys next time. Bye.